They say victory tastes sweet, but in the winner's circle of the Grand State Derby, it mostly tastes like kicked up mud, cheap champagne, and adrenaline. I was standing at the head of Obsidian King, a 1,200-pound beast of muscle and fury, trying to keep him from rearing up and crushing a cameraman. My hands were blistered, my boots were caked in manure, and I had a smear of dark track dirt across my forehead that I couldn't wipe away because my hands were full of leather. And 3 feet away, spotless in a cream-colored linen suit, stood my brother, Brecken. He looked like a Greek god who had just descended from Olympus, not a man who had spent the morning hungover in a luxury box. Beside him, my parents, Stellan and Mairead Vane, were beaming, clutching the massive gold trophy like it was a holy relic. They hadn't touched a horse in a decade. My mother was allergic to hay, and my father was afraid of anything weighing more than him. But looking at them now, you'd think they'd run the 1.25 miles barefoot themselves. "Mr. Vane!" a reporter from ESPN shouted, shoving a microphone past my face, merely hitting the horse's nose. "This is the upset of the century. A horse nobody believed in, beating the Triple Crown favorites. How did you do it? How did you build this champion?" Brecken flashed that $1 million smile, the one that had charmed bankers, heiresses, and loan officers all over Kentucky. He placed a manicured hand on the horse's neck, careful not to actually touch the sweat. "Vision," Brecken said, his voice smooth as bourbon. "It takes a visionary to see a king in a pauper. I raised him. I trained him. I own him. This victory belongs to the Vane family legacy." I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on the lead rope and stared directly into the camera lens. Brecken thought he was the king of Lexington. He thought this trophy was the beginning of his dynasty. He didn't know that the folded piece of paper burning a hole in the back pocket of my dirty jeans was about to turn his victory lap into a funeral march. He said he owned the horse. I was about to prove that he didn't even own the suit he was wearing. To understand why I stood there in the mud, silent while my brother stole my life's work, you have to understand the silence of the barn at 3:30 in the morning. That was my world. That was my time. While the rest of Lexington was asleep, tucked into high thread count sheets and climate-controlled master suites, my alarm would scream into the darkness of the loft apartment above the foaling stalls. It wasn't a luxury apartment. It was a converted storage room with poor insulation, smelling perpetually of hay, ammonia, and liniment oil. In the winters, I could see my breath hanging in the air above my bed. In the summers, the humidity turned the room into a sauna, but I didn't live there to be comfortable. I lived there because foals don't wait for business hours to be born, and colts with colic don't wait for the sun to rise before they try to die on you. My name is Tallis Vane. To the racing world, if they knew me at all, I was just the help. I was the girl in the background of the photos holding the lead rope, looking tired. To my family, I was something even less, an unfortunate necessity. A mechanic who kept the Ferrari running so they could drive it to the country club. My hands tell the story better than my words ever could. My knuckles are permanently swollen, a map of scars and calluses woven over the bone. I have a jagged white line running down my left forearm from where a spooked yearling kicked me into a fence post when I was 19. I didn't go to the hospital that day. I wrapped it in vet tape, took 3 ibuprofen, and finished mucking the stalls. That's the Vane family philosophy, at least for me. The work comes first. Complaints come never. My brother Brecken lived in the vet tape. Main house. It's a sprawling, white-pillared antebellum mansion that sits at the top of the hill overlooking the pastures. It looks like something out of Gone with the Wind. It has 6 bedrooms, a wine cellar, and a staff of 3 housekeepers. Brecken's workday usually started around 11 a.m., when he would stroll down the gravel path in his pristine riding boots that had never actually touched stirrups, holding a coffee. He would lean against the fence while I was dragging 50-pound bales of alfalfa through the mud. "Tallis," he'd say, checking his phone. "Make sure the yearlings are groomed by noon. I have some investors coming from Dubai. I need everything looking cinematic. Cinematic. That was Brecken's favorite word. He treated Vane Stables like a movie set. The horses were props, the staff were extras, and he was the star. He didn't know the difference between a fetlock and a flank, but he knew how to sell the dream of horse ownership to wealthy idiots who had too much money and not enough sense. I was the one who actually ran the business. I was the head trainer, the barn manager, the veterinarian's assistant, and the accountant. I managed the feed ratios, tracked the breeding cycles, handled the shoeing schedule, and sat up all night with sick mares. I hadn't taken a vacation in 6 years. Not a weekend, not a Christmas. Animals don't take days off, so neither did I. My parents, Stella and Mairead, loved the idea of having a daughter in the business, but they hated the reality of it. They wanted a horse country princess, someone who wore tailored jackets and equestrian hats and sipped mint juleps in the clubhouse. Instead, they got me. I remember one dinner about 6 months ago. It was a rare occasion where I was summoned to the main house. Usually, I ate a sandwich standing up in the tack room, but they needed an extra body at the table because a local senator was visiting. I had scrubbed myself raw in the shower, trying to get the smell of the barn off my skin. I wore a simple black dress, the only one I owned that wasn't covered in horsehair. I sat at the end of the mahogany table, listening to my father hold court. The Vane legacy is about bloodlines, Stellan was saying, swirling a glass of scotch that cost more than my monthly salary. Breeding is an art form. You have to have an instinct for it. Brecken has it. He has the eye. I looked across the table at Brecken. He was busy charming the senator's wife, laughing at something innocuous. Brecken couldn't pick a champion out of a lineup of donkeys. The only eye he had was for the mirror. Actually, I spoke up, my voice feeling rusty from disuse in polite company. The new filly's bloodline suggests she's going to be a sprinter, not a distance runner. No, let me stop from walking away from my table. If we push her too hard on the mile track, we're going to blow out her knees before she's 3. The table went silent. My mother, Mairead, offered a tight, pained smile. It was the smile you give a child who has just burped during a funeral. "Tallis, darling," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Let's not bore the senator with the messy details. That's why we have staff, isn't it? Brecken sees the big picture, the messy details. That's what I was to them. A detail. A smudge on the portrait. They ignored the fact that the farm was technically hemorrhaging money. They ignored that we had mortgaged the south pasture to pay for the new roof on a main house. They ignored that the only reason we were still solvent was because I had cut feed costs by negotiating directly with the suppliers and fired the lazy grooms Brecken kept hiring as favors to his fraternity brothers. I swallowed my anger with a mouthful of cold potatoes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and show them the spreadsheets that proved Brecken was driving us into bankruptcy, but I didn't. Why? Why did I stay? It wasn't for them. It was for the horses. Specifically, it was for the dark, angry colt standing in stall number 4, the one everyone else was afraid of, the one named Obsidian King. When he was born, he was a disaster, skittish, aggressive, and awkward. He had bit the vet and kicked a hole in the siding within his first week. My father wanted to sell him for meat prices. "He's got a devil in him," Stellan had said. "Bad temperament. He'll kill a rider. Get rid of him." But I saw something else. I saw a horse that wasn't mean but terrified. I saw an animal with so much raw power he didn't know how to contain it. I saw myself. For 3 years, I was the only human being Obsidian King allowed in his stall. I didn't break him. I earned him. I spent thousands of hours sitting in the straw with him, reading books aloud so he would get used to my voice. I trained him with a soft touch, not a whip. I taught him to channel that rage into speed. I built him from a call, a reject, into a machine made of muscle and heart. I stayed because if I left, they would ruin him, they would break his spirit, or sell him to someone who would run him into the ground. So I took the insults. I took the 3 a.m. alarms. I took the invisibility. I let them wear the white suits and take the credit. I let them pretend they were the architects of this success. But as I stood in that winner's circle, listening to Brecken claim he raised the horse that had tried to kill him the only time he ever entered its stall, something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a lock clicking open. They thought I was their servant. They thought I was trapped by my love for the animals, bound to the farm by duty and lack of options. They thought I was just Talus, the stable rat. They forgot that rats know where all the tunnels are. And they forgot that while they were busy watching the finish line, I was the one who had read the rule book. If you looked up vein stables on Instagram, you wouldn't see the rotting support beams in the hayloft or the pile of final notices from the electric company stacked on the kitchen counter. You would see Brecken. Brecken Vane, my 29-year-old brother, was a man curated for the lens. He was the director of racing operations, a title my father invented for him the day Brecken flunked out of his second semester of business school. To the outside world, Brecken was the young, dynamic face of a historic Kentucky dynasty. He was charming, handsome, in a lazy, heavy-lidded way, and possessed the unique ability to make people feel lucky just to buy him a drink. But I knew the real Brecken. I knew him as the showman. The showman didn't know how to bandage a leg wrap. He didn't know the difference between colic and colitis. What he knew was how to spend money we didn't have on things we didn't need to impress people who didn't care. Last year, while I was begging my father for $5,000 to repair the fence in the stallion paddock, a critical safety issue, Brecken went out and bought a custom-branded leather interior horse trailer for $80,000. It's about branding, Talus, he had lectured me, leaning against the shiny aluminum siding of the useless trailer while I duct-taped a broken water trough. Nobody trusts a farm that looks poor. You have to project success to attract success. This trailer says, "We are champions. We can't even afford the gas to pull it," I'd replied, wiping sweat from my eyes. "You have no imagination," he scoffed, checking his reflection in the trailer's window. "That's why you're better off in the barn. Leave the business to the visionaries." That was the dynamic. I was the labor, he was the vision. But his vision was rotting us from the inside out. Brecken had a secret, one that the family worked exhausting hours to ignore. He was a degenerate gambler. It wasn't just horses, it was football, poker, stocks, anything with a thrill. He chased the high of the win because he had never actually earned anything in his life. He needed luck because he had no skill. I found the slips in the trash. I heard the frantic phone calls to bookies when he thought the barn was empty. He was bleeding the farm dry, siphoning operating cash to cover his losses, and my parents let him do it. This brings us to Stellan and Mairead Vane, the dynasty. My parents were relics of a bygone era, people who believed that their surname was a currency that would never devalue. They were obsessed with the Vane legacy, a concept that seemed to involve drinking expensive bourbon at 11 a.m. and pretending the world hadn't changed since 1950. Stellan, my father, was a hard man, but not in the way a farmer is hard. He was brittle. His ego was a fragile glass structure that required constant reinforcement. He viewed me not as a daughter, but as a failed son. I was too tall, too broad-shouldered, too loud, and far too opinionated. I didn't look good in the family photos. I ruined the aesthetic. Mairead, my mother, was the enabler-in-chief. She treated Brecken like a fragile porcelain doll that needed to be wrapped in cotton wool. If Brecken lost money, it was bad luck or market conditions. If I saved money, it was stinginess. The depth of their delusion hit me fully about 2 months before the Derby, during a strategy meeting in the main dining room. The farm was in trouble, deep trouble. The bank had called twice that week, threatening to freeze our operating accounts. I walked into the dining room with a stack of spreadsheets, ready to present a survival plan. My plan was unglamorous: sell the flashy trailer, cut the marketing budget, reduce the number of horses in training, and focus on the consistent earners. I sat down, laying the papers on the table. We have to stop the bleeding, I said, pointing to the red ink. Brecken spent $15,000 on a client dinner in Louisville last week. We haven't paid the feed supplier in 2 months. If we don't cut back, we won't make it to the Derby. Stellan didn't even look at the papers. He was staring out the window at the manicured lawn. We can't cut back, Stellan said, his voice icy. If we show weakness, the sharks will circle. The rumors will start. The rumors are already starting, Dad, I said, keeping my voice level. The feed guy won't deliver until we pay cash. That's a rumor. That's a fact. Don't be so dramatic, Tallis. Mairead sighed, adjusting her pearl necklace. You always focus on the negative. It's so draining. Then Brecken spoke up. He was swirling a glass of whiskey, looking bored. The problem isn't the spending, Tallis. The problem is the revenue. We need a big hit. We need a headline. We need to pay the bills, I snapped. No, Stellan slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. He glared at me with a look of pure disdain. Your brother is right. We don't save our way out of this. We win our way out. We are Vanes. We are winners. He turned to Brecken, his expression softening instantly into adoration. Brecken has a plan. Tell her. Brecken smirked. We're going all in on Obsidian King. We're tripling the entry fees. We're hiring a PR firm to hype him up. We're going to make him the star of the Derby. That horse is a long shot, I argued, though I knew he was special. If he loses, we lose everything. We lose the land. We lose the house. He won't lose, Brecken said arrogantly. I have a feeling. A feeling? I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. You're betting the farm on a feeling? You're betting my farm, Stellan corrected me cold. This is my land, Tallis. Brecken is the future of this family. You are here to support him. If you can't do that, if you can't be a team player, then maybe you shouldn't be in the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. They looked at me like I was a stranger, an intruder who had wandered in from the stables to dirty their nice rug. I realized then that it didn't matter that I was the one up at dawn. It didn't matter that I was the one who knew the horse's heart rates and dietary needs. To them, I was just a mechanism, a tool. I was the engine room of a sinking ship, and they were the captains drinking champagne on the bridge, refusing to believe the water was rising. But as I gathered my spreadsheets and stood up to leave the room, leaving them to their delusions of grandeur, I looked at Brecken. He was smiling at his reflection in the window again. Enjoy the view, brother, I thought, because when the glass breaks, you're going to be the first one to get cut. The walk from the track to the media center felt like a hallucination. My ears were still ringing from the roar of the crowd. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer physical crash of the adrenaline leaving my system. Beside me, Obsidian King was being led away to the testing barn by a groom, his dark coat glistening like oil, his head high. He knew he was a king. I wanted to go with him. I wanted to make sure he was cooled down properly, checked for soreness, and given his extra ration of carrots. But my father's hand had clamped onto my shoulder like a vice grip. You're coming with us, Stellan hissed, his breath smelling of premium cigars and stale coffee. Stand in the back, don't speak unless asked, and for God's sake, try to look like you belong to a successful family. We entered the press room. It was a blinding wall of flash bulbs and camera lenses. The air was thick with the heat of bodies and the electric hum of a breaking story. A long table was draped in white cloth, set with microphones from every major sports network. Brecken sat in the center seat, naturally. My parents flanked him like royal guards. I was directed to stand off to the side, just out of the primary frame, like a bodyguard or a servant. The questions came fast. They asked about the odds, the strategy, the bloodline. Brecken answered them all with smooth, rehearsed lies. He talked about our proprietary training regimen and the Vane intuition. I stood there, mud drying on my jeans, listening to my brother take credit for the thousands of mornings I had spent freezing in the dark. But I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the math. In horse racing, the split is sacred. The owner gets the purse, but the trainer, the person who actually builds the animal, gets 10%. The purse for the Grand State Derby was $2 million. That meant $200,000 was mine. But more importantly, the victory increased the horse's value exponentially. If we sold him or syndicated him for breeding, I was entitled to 10% of that sale price too. I was doing the calculations in my head. I was finally going to be free. I could buy my own small farm. I could leave the loft. I could escape them. Then, the room went quiet as a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stood up in the front row. "Mr. Vane," the man said. He was recognized immediately as the acquisition agent for the Al Hassan Group, a Saudi Arabian conglomerate that treated horse racing like a game of Monopoly. "My employers are impressed. Very impressed. We don't like to wait for auctions. We are prepared to make an offer for the horse right now. Ownership, breeding rights, everything." The room held its breath. This was the Hollywood moment. "How much?" Brecken asked, leaning into the mic, his eyes glittering with greed. $25 million, the agent said calmly. "Wire transfer. Today." 25 million. I felt my knees so weak. That was it. That was the salvation of Vane Stables. And my share, my 10%, would be $2.50 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined. It was a life-changing fortune. I looked at my father. Stellan's face had lost its composure. He looked like a starving wolf presented with a fresh carcass. He leaned over and whispered frantically into Brecken's ear. I saw them look at each other, then they both looked at me. It was a quick glance. Cold, calculating, dismissive. In that split second, I saw the decision being made. I saw the math being done in their heads. $2.50 million was a lot of money to give to a stable rat. Why give it to me when they could keep it all? They needed every cent to cover Brecken's gambling debts and Stellan's bad investments. Brecken straightened his tie and cleared his throat. He looked into the cameras with a solemn, practiced expression of regret. "We accept the offer," Brecken announced. The room erupted in murmurs. "However," Brecken continued, raising a hand for silence, "with this new chapter for the Vane family, we are announcing a restructuring of our operations. The $25 million will be reinvested into the estate to ensure our legacy continues." He paused, and then he turned his head slightly to look at me. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed that he had to do this. "Effective immediately," Brecken said, his voice projecting clearly to the millions of people watching at home. "We are parting ways with our current trainer, Tallis Vane." The breath was knocked out of me. The reporters turned their heads, cameras pivoting to find me in the shadows. "Why the change?" a reporter shouted. "She just trained a Derby winner." "It's a matter of professional standards," Brecken lied, his voice lowering to a confidential tone that screamed scandal. "While we love Tallis as family, her methods have become erratic. There were incidents of dietary mismanagement, negligence in the barn. Frankly, we feel that negligence King won despite her involvement, not because of it. We had to step in personally over the last few months to correct her mistakes." "A complete malicious fabrication. He wasn't just firing me to save the commission money. He was destroying my reputation to justify it by accusing me of negligence and dietary mismanagement." On national television, he was ensuring I would never work in this industry again. No reputable owner would trust a trainer accused of hurting a multi-million-dollar asset. My mother, Mairead, nodded solemnly beside him. "It's a hard decision for a mother," she added, playing the victim. "But we have to put the welfare of the animals first. Tallis needs time to find herself. Outside of the industry, they were burying me. They were taking my money, my credit, and my future. And they were burying me under a mountain of lies so they could keep the entire $25 million for themselves." I looked at Stellan, my father. The man I had worked for since I was 12 years old. He met my gaze with eyes as hard as flint. There was no apology there, just a silent warning. Don't make a scene. Take the fall. You are nothing. The reporters were shouting questions at me now. Tallis, is it true? Did you mishandle the horse? I felt a heat rising in my chest that was hotter than the sun. It was a pure, white-hot clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't run to the podium and beg for the truth. I just reached into my back pocket. My fingers brushed against the rough, folded paper I had carried around for 3 years. The paper was stained with sweat and shaped to the curve of my hip. Brecken turned back to the Saudi agent, smiling that winning smile. We can sign the papers immediately. The horse is ours to sell, after all. Ours. I took a step forward. The mud from my boots cracked on the polished floor. Actually, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden lull of the room, it cut through the air like a whip crack. He isn't. The silence in the press room was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a car crash. Brecken laughed. It was a brittle, nervous sound that bounced off the walls. She's emotional, he said to the cameras, flashing a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ignore her. It's been a long day. Security, perhaps you could escort my sister to the car. 2 large men in venue blazers started to move toward me. I wouldn't do that, I said, my voice steady. I didn't look at the guards. I looked directly at the Saudi agent. Not unless you want to be named in a lawsuit for the theft of assets. The agent raised a hand, halting the guards. He was a businessman, and businessmen don't like the word theft. He looked at me with narrowed eyes. What are you suggesting, Miss Vane? I didn't answer him immediately. Instead, I looked at my father. Stellan's face had gone a peculiar shade of gray. He recognized the piece of paper in my hand. He should have. He was the one who made me sign it. Do you remember November 14th, 3 years ago, Dad? I asked softly. He didn't speak. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Let me refresh your memory, I said, turning to the room, because the story of how Obsidian King was raised isn't about vain intuition. It's about a rainy Tuesday night and a bottle of scotch. The room faded away from me. I was pulled back to that night. It was raining so hard the water was coming sideways through the slats of the foaling barn. The air was freezing. I was kneeling in the straw, my knees soaked in muck, holding the head of a 4-month-old foal. The foal, Obsidian King, was in agony. He had been born with a severe angular limb deformity. His front left leg was crooked, twisting inward. He couldn't walk without pain. He was feverish, shaking violently, his dark eyes wide with terror. The vet, Dr. Evans, had just left. He had given me the prognosis. Surgery could fix it, but it would cost $6,000, plus months of rehabilitation. Without the surgery, the foal would be crippled for life. The barn door banged open. Stellan stumbled in. He was wearing his expensive raincoat, but he was drunk. He reeked of peat and anger. He had just lost a bundle on a bad investment in Florida, and he was looking for something to kick. He looked down at me, then at the shivering foal. Why is this animal still here? Stellan slurred, bracing himself against a wooden post. Evans told me he's a cull, a defect. He needs surgery, Dad, I pleaded, wrapping my jacket around the foal's neck. It's $6,000. If we do it now, he can heal. He has strong lungs. He has a good heart. Please. Stellan laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. 6,000 for a cripple? I wouldn't spend 600. He's a write-off, Tallis, a genetic dead end. I told the knackerman to come in the morning. Put him down. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, you can't. He's a fighter. He's a liability. Stellan roared, kicking the stall door. The foal scrambled back, terrified, winning in pain. I run a business, not a charity ward for broken toys. I am not paying a dime for a horse that will never race. He is dead weight on my ledger. I stood up. I was 23 years old, tired and broke, but I blocked his path to the animal. I'll pay for it. Stellan stopped. He looked at me with bleary, mocking amusement. You don't have $6,000. I'll work it off. I'll take extra shifts. I'll sell my truck. Just don't kill him. Stellan stared at me for a long moment. Then a twisted idea formed behind his eyes. He reached into his raincoat pocket and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a napkin. It was a standard livestock transfer and release of liability form. He carried them because he was always trading cattle and feed. He slapped the paper against the rough wood of the stall wall. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket. "You want him," Stellan sneered. "Fine, but I'm not having his vet bills on my books. I'm not having his feed costs on my accounts. If you want to save the king, you buy him. Right now." He scribbled furiously on the paper. "Price, $1, Stellan muttered as he wrote. "Sold as is. No warranties. Buyer assumes all future liability, medical costs, and, here's the important part, maintenance expenses." He shoved the paper at me. "Sign it. He's your problem now. If he dies, you pay for the disposal. If he lives and eats us out of house and home, I dock it from your pay." I didn't hesitate. I reached into my jeans pocket. I had exactly $3 in change and a single crumpled $1 bill. I smoothed the dollar bill out on the stall gate. I took the pen. I signed my name in the buyer line. Stellan signed the seller line. He even made the night watchman, Old Man Miller, sign as a witness before he passed out in the tack room. "Congratulations," Stellan spat, snatching the dollar bill. "You just bought a piece of trash." I came back to the present. The memory was so vivid I could almost smell the rain. I looked at the piece of paper in my hand. It was stained with water spots and yellowed at the edges. It had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times, but the ink was black and permanent. I walked forward and placed the document gently on the table in front of the Saudi agent, right on top of the shiny, meaningless contract Brecken had been about to sign. "This," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room, "is a notarized bill of sale, dated November 14th, 3 years ago." The agent picked it up. He put on a pair of reading glasses. The camera zoomed in. "It clearly states," I continued, pointing to the scribbled paragraph, "that Stellan Vane transfers 100% of the ownership, title, and interest in the foal known as Obsidian King to Talus Vame." I looked at Brecken. His tan had vanished. He looked like a ghost. "It also states," I added, twisting the knife, "that the buyer, me, assumes all financial responsibility for the horse." And I did. I paid for his surgery with my savings. I paid for his feed out of my wages. I paid for his shoes. I paid for his entry fees under the farm's account, which I then reimbursed. I turned back to the agent. "The Vane family farm doesn't own Obsidian King. They haven't owned him since he was 4 months old. They don't have the right to sell him to you." I leaned in close to the microphone, staring directly at my father. "You sold him to me for $1, Dad, because you thought he was trash. You wanted to save $6,000. I paused, letting the number hang in the air. "That greed just cost you $25 million. The pen dropped from Brecken's hand. It hit the table with a plastic clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden quiet of the room. For a moment, nobody moved. The reporters were too stunned to shout questions. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the precise moment the blood drained out of the Vane family dynasty. The Saudi agent, Mr. Al-Hassan, didn't look angry. He looked interested. He was a man who dealt in billions, not millions, and he had seen enough boardroom coups to know when power was shifting. He gestured to the man standing to his left, a severe-looking lawyer with wire-rimmed glasses who had been silent until now. "Check it," Al-Hassan said, pointing to the dirty, crumpled paper I had placed on the table. The lawyer stepped forward. He picked up the document as if it were a piece of evidence in a murder trial. He smoothed out the creases. He adjusted his glasses. Stellan made a move to snatch it back, his hand darting out like a snake, but the lawyer was faster. He pulled the paper away, fixing my father with a look of sharp rebuke. "Please, Mr. Vane," the lawyer said, his voice dry. "Let's maintain some dignity." Stellan was vibrating with rage. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's a scrap of paper. It was a joke. A bad joke from 3 years ago. I was teaching her a lesson about responsibility. It has no legal standing, actually," the lawyer said, looking up from the page. "It has every legal standing. It is a standard Kentucky livestock bill of sale. It details the animal's markings, the sire, the dam, and the foaling date. It is signed by both parties. It is dated, and it is witnessed." The lawyer pointed to a shaky signature at the bottom. "Who is Thomas Miller? He was our barn manager." I said, my voice cutting through Stellan's stammering. He retired last year. He lives in Lexington, and he hates my father. I'm sure he'd be happy to testify to the validity of that signature. The lawyer nodded slowly. He turned to Mr. Alhassan and spoke 3 words that effectively detonated the room. The title is defective. Mr. Alhassan nodded. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The checkbook, which had been lying on the table, disappeared back into his pocket. Mr. Vane, Alhassan said to Brecken, his voice cold and dismissive, you attempted to sell me stolen property. In my country, the punishment for this is severe. In this country, I believe it is merely fraud. Wait. Brecken stood up, knocking his chair over. The showman mask was cracking, revealing the terrified child underneath. We can fix this. Tallis, listen. Okay, so you have a paper. Fine. We'll cut you in. We'll give you 20%. No, 30. 30% of the $25 million. That's $7 million, Tallis. Just rip up the paper. Sign the transfer. Don't be stupid. I looked at Brecken. He looked pathetic. He was trying to negotiate with a terrorist, but he didn't realize he was the hostage. I don't want 30%, Brecken, I said calmly. I own 100%. You can't support him. Stellan roared, slamming his fist on the table. You live in a loft. You have no capital. You have no capital. You can't afford the insurance. The horse is stabled on my land. By God, I'll file a lien against you for 3 years of room and board that will bury you. I had been waiting for this. I reached into my other pocket, the front left pocket of my jeans, and pulled out a small black leather notebook. I tossed it onto the table next to the bill of sale. I thought you might say that, I said. That notebook contains a log of every dollar you docked from my paycheck for husses over the last 36 months. It also contains the receipts for every bag of grain, every bale of hay, and every vet bill I paid for personally because the farm's credit account was frozen. I opened the notebook to the last page. According to my calculations, I have actually overpaid for his board by about $1,500. I'll waive that debt. Consider it a parting gift. Stellan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked at the cameras, realizing that every second of this humiliation was being broadcast live to his peers, his rivals, and his creditors. Mr. Alhassan turned to me. He looked at me with a new respect. Miss Vane, he said, my offer stands. $25 million, wire transfer to your account. We can sign the papers right now, without your family involved. The room went silent again. $25 million. I could see the hunger in Stellan's eyes. He was already calculating how to sue me for it. I looked at the horse who was standing calmly in the corner of the paddock area, watching me. Then I looked back at the agent. I'm sorry, Mr. Alhassan, I said, but Obsidian King isn't for sale. Everyone has a price, Alhassan said. Not for this horse, I replied. He isn't a commodity to me. He's a partner. And we're not just retiring. We're going to race. You have no facilities, Mairead shrieked, finally finding her voice. You have nowhere to go. You are homeless as of this minute. Get off our property. I'm not homeless, I corrected her, and I'm not without facilities. I turned to the back of the room where a man had just entered. He was older, with silver hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore a simple denim jacket, but everyone in Kentucky knew who he was. It was Silas Redgrave, the owner of Redgrave Farms, the Vane family's oldest, most bitter rival. Stellan had spent the last 20 years trying to ruin Redgrave. Silas, I nodded to him. Tallis, Silas replied, walking through the crowd of reporters who parted like the Red Sea. He walked right past Stellan without even looking at him. He stopped in front of me. Trucks outside, engines running. Is the king ready to load? He is, I said. I turned back to my family one last time. I've entered into a partnership with Redgrave Farms, I announced to the press. I retain full ownership of the horse. Mr. Redgrave is providing the facilities and the logistics in exchange for future breeding rights. We're going to run him in the Preakness, we're going to run him in the Belmont, and we're going to do it under the Redgrave colors. Stellan looked like he was having a stroke. The veins in his neck were bulging. Losing the money was one thing. Losing the horse to his own daughter was another. But seeing his prize champion walked onto a Redgrave truck, That was a level of shame that would kill him socially. You traitor, Stellan whispered. You ungrateful, spiteful little. Business is business, Dad, I said, interrupting him with the same words he had used on me 1,000 times when he missed my birthdays for board meetings. You taught me that. You said, we win our way out. Well, I just won. I turned my back on them. Silas, I said, let's get my horse. Walking away from your family is not like it is in the movies. There is no slow-motion explosion in the background. There is no swelling orchestral music. There is just the sound of frantic shouting fading behind you and the rhythmic clatter of horse hooves on concrete. I didn't look back. I knew what was happening in that room. I could hear the reporters swarming Stellan and Brecken like piranhas sensing blood. The questions had shifted from how did you breed a champion to Mr. Vane is the farm solvent and Brecken, are you facing criminal charges for the attempted fraudulent sale? I walked Obsidian King out of the double doors of the media center and into the cool, late afternoon air of the stable area. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the dirt. It was the kind of light that usually made me feel peaceful, but today it felt like fire. It felt like burning the dead wood to make room for new growth. Silas Redgrave walked beside me. He didn't say a word, he just chewed on a toothpick and kept pace, his presence a silent shield against the chaos I had just unleashed. We reached the loading area where the massive Redgrave transport truck was idling. It was a beautiful rig, clean, well-maintained, with the Redgrave crimson gold logo painted on the side. It looked like professionalism. It looked like safety. As I lowered the ramp, I heard running footsteps behind us. Tallis, stop! It was Brecken. He had run out of the press room, his hair disheveled, his tie loose. He looked manic, his eyes wide with a desperation I had never seen in him before. He stopped about 10 feet away, blocked by two of Silas's grooms who had stepped forward, arms crossed. You can't do this, Brecken panted, pointing a trembling finger at me. You have no idea what you've done. The investors, they were watching. If we don't get that capital, the bank calls the loan on Monday. Monday, Tallis. We lose the house. We lose the cars. Everything. I paused, my hand resting on Obsidian King's flank. The horse was calm, trusting me completely. You didn't lose the house today, Brecken, I said, my voice tired but steady. You lost it 3 years ago when you started betting on college football with the payroll money. You lost it when you bought that trailer instead of fixing the fences. Today is just the day the bill came due. We're family, he screamed, tears actually streaming down his face now. It was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years, and it was self-pity. You're destroying your own family for what? For pride? For a horse? No, I said. I'm saving myself, and I'm saving him. I patted the horse's neck. You don't care about this animal, Brecken. You never did. You would have sold him to the Saudis, and they would have shipped him halfway across the world to run on desert tracks until his legs shattered. Then you would have spent the money on a new Porsche and forgotten he ever existed. I can change, Brecken pleaded, dropping to his knees in the dirt. It was a pathetic sight. The golden child, the Prince of Lexington, kneeling in the muck. I'll let you run the barn. I'll give you the title of manager. Just bring him back, please. I don't know how to fix this without the money. I looked at him, and I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't anger anymore. It was pity. He was a 30-year-old man who had never been told no in his life, and now that the world was finally saying it, he was breaking. I know you don't know how to fix it, I said softly. That's the problem. You never learned how to work. You only learned how to pretend. I turned to Silas. Load him up. Silas nodded and took the lead rope. Obsidian King walked up the ramp without hesitation. He knew he was going to a better place. I climbed into the passenger seat of the truck cab. The engine roared, a deep guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards. As we pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. I saw my parents standing at the exit of the media center. Stellan was leaning against the wall, looking old and defeated. Mairead was crying, not for me, but for the reputation she had spent 40 years manicuring. Brecken was still kneeling in the dirt. As we turned the corner and they vanished from sight, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was buzzing incessantly. Texts from my mother, voicemails from my father, New message from Mom, you ungrateful girl. After everything we gave you. Missed call from Dad. I went to the settings menu. I scrolled down to block contact. I blocked Stellan. I blocked Moret. I blocked Brecken. Then, for good measure, I opened the SIM card slot, pulled out the tiny chip, and rolled down the window. I tossed it onto the highway. The silence that followed was the loudest, most beautiful thing I had ever heard. 6 months later, the auction of Vane Stables was the social event of the season, though not the kind my mother would have wanted. It was a foreclosure auction. The bank had moved swiftly after the fraudulent sales scandal hit the news. Investors pulled out, creditors descended like vultures, and the house of cards collapsed in record time. I didn't go to the auction. I heard about it from Silas. He told me that the main house sold for a fraction of its value to a developer who planned to turn it into a golf course clubhouse. The flashy horse trailer was repossessed. The remaining horses were sold off to cover the debts. Stellan and Mairead moved to a small condo in Florida. Rumor had it Stellan spent his days sitting in a plastic chair by the community pool, telling anyone who would listen that he used to be a king in Kentucky and that he was robbed by a ungrateful daughter. They were still bitter. They would always be bitter, but they were no longer my problem. Brecken didn't fare as well. The fraud accusation stuck. He avoided jail time by pleading ignorance and throwing our father under the bus, but his reputation was incinerated. The last I heard, he was working as a car salesman in Cincinnati. He was finally using his skills, God selling things he didn't understand to people who didn't know better. But at least now he had a boss who watched his hours. As for me, I was standing at the rail of the Redgrave training track, holding a stopwatch. The morning mist was lifting off the grass. "Ready?" Silas asked, standing beside me. "Ready," I said. Down the track, a dark shape thundered toward us. Obsidian King. He looked magnificent. He was stronger, faster, and happier than he had ever been. He wasn't just a racehorse anymore. He was a legend in the making. We had won the Preakness. We had placed second in the Belmont. The syndicate fees alone had made me a millionaire twice over. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the deed in my safe deposit box. With my share of the winnings, I had bought a piece of land. Not big, just 50 acres adjacent to the Redgrave property. My own farm, my own barn, my own rules. The horse thundered past us, a blur of speed and power. I clicked the stopwatch. 58 flat, I said, smiling. He's flying. He runs better when he's happy, Silas noted. Don't we all? I replied. I looked out over the rolling hills of Kentucky. The air smelled of sweet grass and rain. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of a life that finally belonged to me. I wasn't the stable rat. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I wasn't the help. I was Talus Vane, and I was the owner of the dark horse that won it all.